wisdom. Tonight's podcast is 7 ways why energized listening and Maverick Questions animate simplicity. Because energized listening and Maverick Questions never complicate life, they unclutter it. They burn off the mental fog and the recycled reactions, along with the inherited conclusion till simplicity stands there unarmored, undeniable. Energized listening pulls you out of the mind's commentary and onto and into the raw pulse of what's actually happening. Maverick Questions crack open the assumptions you didn't know were there. And didn't know you was obeying, and together they return you to a clarity of the here and now that never needs thinking or knowing to exist. Simplicity isn't something you create, it's what remains when the noise shuts off. Some savvy key points. Energized listening dissolves the mind's performance. When you listen without rehearsing your next move, the mental clutter collapses and the simple truth steps forward without needing to be decoded. Maverick Questions break the spell of automatic answers. The real question interrupts the mind's preloaded scripts. It exposes the assumptions hiding under your reactions, and it unveils simple clarity beneath the noise. See, that's the thing. The mind is a noisemaker, and it's above, and it's a first. The body energizes it, and then it reacts. We react with the mind and our nervous system before we even understand what's going on. Together, they return you to direct contact with your nowality. I use nowality instead of reality because reality is whatever your mind and everything is activating at that time. Energized listening receives what's here. Maverick Questions disrupts what's false, and the combination strips life to its simplest form. Unfiltered and unforced and unmistakably clear. Why energized listening and Maverick Questions animate simplicity. It's out in the Sonoran hush, where the desert speaks without language. Energizing listening becomes a celebratory clairvoyance, a way of hearkening the world before the mind translates it. And Maverick Questions move like lightning across old assumptions, cracking open the crust of everything you thought you knew. Because we think and know our way to yesterday, and the more you understand, the mind stops and never gets to now, and then the brain stays before it gets to the now. That's something I've really expanded into in my life, and that's what this is showing you that listening and questioning will rise you to the now. Until simplicity rises from beneath the rubble, never as an idea, but as a living pulse. The desert never simplifies by reducing, it simplifies by unveiling. And that is exactly why listening and questioning do. They strip away the noise from the signal and return you to the veracity and the authenticity that never needed thinking to exist. See, that's the thing about authenticity. It never needs thinking and knowing to exist and show you a better way. As the Desert Oracle expresses, energized listening hears the veracity and the authenticity beneath the mind's dust storms. When you listen with your whole field, never just your ears. The mental static dissolves, and the simple pulse of what's real steps forward, unmasked and ready to express inspiration, to open up your maverick questions, to crack open the illusions you didn't know you were obeying. An authentic question is a desert thunderclap. It fractures the hardened layers of assumption and exposes the clean simplicity hiding underneath all the gunk of life. Together they return you to unfiltered clarity. As the desert has always known, energized listening receives the raw signal as maverick questions break the spell of false certainty and simplicity that emerges from a horizon that refuses to end, wide open, unpunctuated, and undeniably alive and thriving today. As the mind goes quiet, simplicity flows in with hearkened, untamed hush of the desert, where instinct is the only scripture. Energized listening becomes a feral sense, a way of hearing, of hearkening wisdom before it forms words. And the maverick questions stalk the mind's illusions like predators, sniffing out the lies you inherited, the assumptions you never agreed to, until simplicity rises from the bones of everything you've shed, raw, unarmed, undeniable. The desert never simplifies by softening, it simplifies by stripping away that. And that is exactly what listening and questions do. They strip away the dismay, opening up your heavenly heydays. They tear the noise off the signal and rise you to the clarity that existed before you learned to tame your perception prowess, rising to your desired lifestyle. Why energetic listening and maverick questions destroy social obedience. Energetic listening disconnects you from the external noise that trains you to conform. Social obedience depends on distraction, constant messaging, and cultural scripts and inherited expectations. Energetic listening cuts through Energetic listening cuts through the broadcast and the BS. It tunes you into your inner signals, never collective trance. When you hear your own authenticity and acumen more clearly, the society's noise obedience collapses. That's something I really opened up to is social obedience. And most of the stuff going on has a lot to do with social obedience. Uh, Self help, personal growth, self improvement has a lot to do with social obedience. All education, even PhD programming, is social obedience. The revolutionary revelations flow from you to the world. Maverick questions expose the invisible rules you were taught to obey without ever agreeing to them. Social obedience survives through unexamined assumptions. This is how you act. This is what you believe. This is what you don't question. As maverick questions slice them open, they unveil the hidden contracts, the silent expectations, and the unconscious loyalties. Once you see the structure, you'll stop being controlled by it. You break the spell to raise hell and have fun. Together they shift. Together they rise you from conditioned compliance to sovereign perception. Energetic listening dissolves the trance as maverick questions dismantle the programming. Through that double standard, and in that double standard strikes So you strike away social obedience. It loses its power because you're no longer operating from fear, approval seeking stuff, or inherited identity. Social obedience is all inherited. You become a sovereign directed, sovereign sourced, and sovereign authorized. A warrior who listens inward, questions outward, and moves through the world unleash and warrior wise. Clarity, clarity, permission, the prowess of listening in Maverick Questions as energized listening hearkens beneath the mind's camouflage. And as you listen with your whole field, never, you're never rehearsed and not rehearsed identity. You sense the truth and veracity moving under the surface, the simple pulse, and the mind can't manipulate you. That's something, there's a hidden manipulation in the world that controls the world. And it's above education, it's way up there, but we are manipulated by a hidden source. Maverick Questions hunt down the assumptions hiding in your shadows. A real question is a desert predator. It never nibbles at ideas. It tears through the false structures you've been living inside. And that's something I've noticed for myself. We have been living inside false structures. Thinking and knowing is a false structure because it never rises out of yesterday. Unveiling the clean simplicity beneath all the within your innovative wizardry sets you free. Together they return you to instinctual clarity. Energized listening receives the raw signal. Maverick Questions shred the illusions and simplicity. Shred your illusions with simplicity emerges like a wild animal stepping out of the brush, mirroring a gazelle running effortlessly across the savannah. Unpunctuated, uncontrolled, undeniably energized wizardry illuminates your trails of triumph. Out here in the desert where zilch performs and everything unveils itself, energized listening becomes a a way of hearkening veracity before the mind has time to interfere. And Maverick Questions move like lightning bolts across the sky and dissolving old assumptions, cracking open the structures you never even understood or you were obeying, until simplicity steps forward. Raw, unenamored, unmistakable simplicity isn't something you create. It's what appears the moment the noise burns off, and that's what energized listening and Maverick Questions do. They strip the static from the signal. They tear the performance off. Tear the performance off perception, and they return you to the clarity that existed before you learned to complicate what was already obvious. And that's the thing. We have learned all the negativity in the world. Why thinking, knowing, and indoctrinated education shut off listening, intuition, inspiration, imagination, and questions. Thinking and knowing trap you in the past, blocking the energizing wizardry of the present moment. The mind can only think with yesterday's material, memory, conditioning, and inherited scripts. As you rely on thinking and knowing, you're never listening to what's happening now. You're recycling what happened then. Intuition, inspiration, imagination, innovation and the authentic questions all require fresh contact with the moment. As thinking and knowing drag you back into the archive, shutting off your living signal. Indoctrinated education trains you to obey answers instead of explore the veracity and the acumen of now. Education rewards correctness, never curiosity. It teaches you to protect what you know instead of question what you've assumed. If you open up to question, thinking, and knowing, and rise to innovation and being aware that that's holding you back, you can rise out of it. That shuts down because thinking and knowing shuts down listening because listening threatens the identity built on knowledge. It shuts down intuition because intuition doesn't follow the rules. It shuts down imagination because imagination that never asks for permission. As it shuts down inspiration because inspiration can never breathe in a room full of preloaded answers. And that's the world. How is thinking, knowing, knowledge, education all preloaded answers? Thinking and knowing education create a mental noise so loud you can never hear your own inner signals. Listening requires silence. Intuition requires space. Inspiration requires openness. Imagination requires sovereignty and freedom. Question requires humility, as thinking, knowing, and indoctrinated education fill your inner world with commentary, certainty, and performance, a constant mental broadcast that drowns out the deeper intelligence trying to speak through you. Simplicity Unleashed is listening. Simplicity Unleashed deepens listening, and questions disrupt your all your ingrained knowledge from yesterday. Energized listening harkens the artistic acumen before it becomes thought. Clears the seer's field. Listening is never an action. It's a it's never an action. It's a revelation. A way of sensing the world in its unspoken form. Where simplicity rises like a vision, but untouched by interpretation. It's a pure signal before the mind tries to translate it. Maverick Questions open the hidden doorways in your perception prowess. An authentic question never seeks an answer, it seeks an unveiling. It cracks the shell of hell of inherited certainty and lets the simple luminous truth step out of the shadows as if it had been waiting for you to finally ask. That's something I'm really starting to understand. The world is waiting for people to ask questions to rise out of social obedience. Together they optimize you to authentic clarity beneath all stories. Energized listening receives the whisper. Maverick Questions part the veil, and simplicity emerges as the soul's native language. The one you know before you learn native language is the one you know, understand before you learn to complicate what was already clear. And that's basically what we've been taught, is to complicate the simplicity of life. And that's Thursday nights is why we education and PhD programming complicate life. Complicate the simplicity of life. Why energized listening and Maverick Question dissolves inherited drama and trauma. Energized listening bypasses the mind's wounded narration and hearkens the veracity beneath the story. Inherited drama and trauma survive through repetition. The same inner commentary the same emotional reflexes, and the same identity loops. And that's something I've really opened up and rose out of myself, as I was doing a lot of things like my parents, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. Energized listening cuts straight under the noise. It harkens the raw signal beneath the wound story, dissolving the drama because it no longer has a narrator to animate it. When you listen from your field instead of your fear, the old patterns lose their script. As Maverick Questions shatter the unconscious agreements you made with other people's pain, drama and trauma often aren't yours, they're inherited, especially from your parents and your friends. They're inherited, absorbed, or trained into you. Maverick Questions slice through those invisible contracts. They ask the kind of authentic piercing questions to cut through and expose the lie. You've been living inside the lie you've been living inside. Who told you this was mine? Or who told me this is mine? You did. I did. That's the thing I understand. Everything I think is in the outside world is inside me. Who benefits from me carrying this around? What happens when I stop obeying this story and write my own nowography? One real question can collapse a generational pattern. Together, they interrupt the emotional autopilot that keeps old wounds alive within me. Drama, trauma, repeat because the mind keeps reacting the same way. Trauma and drama are the comfort zone programming that you did and you used to get out of things, but we also used it to fit in. Maverick Questions stop the assumption. And in that double interruption, the inherited pattern has nowhere to land. The loop breaks, the charge dissolves, simplicity returns, never as techniques, as your natural state once the inherited noise burns off. You return to your calm, natural state once the inherited noise burns off. While energized listening and Maverick Questions rise you out of yesterday and optimize your health, wealth, and fun and lavish cash flow. Energized listening pulls you out of yesterday's noise and tunes you into the frequencies where opportunities actually thrive. Yesterday's drama, doubt, and conditioning run on static, the kind that blocks intuition, drains vitality, and blinds you to the openings. Energized listening clears that interference. It drops you into the present moment's raw signals where your body knows what's aligned, your intuition knows what's profitable, and your energy is aware what's worth moving toward. Health rises, wealth pathways unveil themselves. Fun becomes a natural again because you stop dragging yesterday's weight with you. Maverick questions break the mental loops that keep you repeating old patterns instead of receiving fresh abundance. Yesterday's mindset creates yesterday's results. That's why thinking, knowing, and yesterday you keep getting the same results. Maverick Questions slice through those loops like a warrior blade, Why am I still obeying this old story? What if the opposite is true? See, them questions are for you to answer yourself. What becomes possible when I stop carrying what isn't mine? Each question disrupts a limitation. Each disruption opens a fresh channel of insight. Cash flow expands because your perception expands. Together, they shift your internal operating system from survival mode to innovation mode and to the frequency of fun, health, wealth, and a lavish cash flow multiplies because you're wise. Energized listening connects you to your natural wisdom, insight, and clarity. Maverick Questions now wire your trajectory. This combination lifts you out of yesterday's gravity and drops you into a future forward field where your choices, energy, and intuition align with your prosperity. This optimization at the soul level, the kind that makes health effortless, wealth inevitable, fun magnetic, and the lavish cash flow a national flow from your clarity. While energized listening and maverick questions destroy egotistical illusions, egotistical arrogance, know-it-all ignorance. Energized listening exposes the ego's noise by revealing what's actually present. Ego survives by talking over reality, narrating, defending performance, pretending all your life. Yesterday is today. Energized listening slices that performance. As you listen from your field instead of your ego, the illusions collapse because they can never survive the contact with what's real. Arrogance dissolves, ignorance gets unveiled. The know-it-all identity loses its stage. Maverick questions puncture the ego's certainty and force it to face what it's been avoiding. Ego thrives on answered, fixed, rigid, unquestioned answers. Maverick questions slices through that rigidity. They challenge the assumptions. The ego hides behind, exposing the blind spots it refuses to acknowledge. One real question can dismantle an entire delusion the ego spent years constructing. How many times do the egotistical illusions of your daily life repeat themselves? Mine do, but now I can just ask what it is. Together they break the ego's addiction to being right and return you to direct authenticity. Energized listening removes the noise. Maverick questions remove the false certainties. What remains is a clarity, never the ego's version of clarity. How do we live the ego's version of clarity? As the warrior's version, clean, grounded, and unpretendable. In that state, arrogance has zero fuel, illusions, and has zero shelter, and ignorance has nowhere to hide. Why energized listening and maverick questions energize energetic liberation, deprograms the mind, binds, and unleashes liberates you and unleashes you. Energized listening breaks the mind's hypnotic loops and reconnects you to your mind signal. Mind binds survive through noise, commentary, memory, identity, and reaction. Energized listening cuts straight through the static and tune you back into the raw, unfiltered pulse beneath it. When you listen from your sovereign field instead of your conditioning, the old programming loses its grips. Liberation begins the moment you hearken what is actually here instead of what your mind insists is here. Maverick questions detonate the hidden assumptions that keep you loyal to yesterday's limitations. Mind binds are held in place by unchallenged beliefs inherited, absorbed, and unquestioned. Maverick questions slice them open. That exposes the lies you've been living inside, the roles you never chose, the stories you've been performing out of habit. Have you been doing that? I have. One real question can collapse an entire identity structure and unleash the sovereignty that was entrapped beneath it. If you take the word self out of your life and use the word sovereignty, you will rise out of yesterday. Together they flip your internal prowess source from programmed obedience to sovereign expression. Energized listening dissolves the trance. Maverick questions dismantle the cage. The combination energizes energetic liberation. A full body rises from reacting to creating, from repeating to inspiration. Expressions, from surviving to unleashing, there is where your clarity sharpens and your energy rises. Your voice returns and your life stops echoing yesterday and starts broadcasting today within you. Why energized listening and maverick questions liberate you and unleash you. Energized listening pulls you out of the mind's cage and back into your raw, unfiltered power. When you listen from your field instead of your thoughts, the mental noise loses its authority. The commentary of yesterday collapses. The old identity loosens. You stop reacting from habit and start responding from presence. That liberating and that rise alone is liberation. Energized listening reconnects you to the truth beneath the story, the instinct beneath the conditioning, the self beneath the performance. Maverick questions break the invisible contracts you made with limitations. So that's the thing, we've made contracts with limitation. Every cage has a belief holding it together. Maverick questions slice straight into those beliefs, the inherited ones, the unconscious ones, the ones you've never agreed to but still obeyed. A single real question can expose the lie you've been living inside, and it collapses the structure that kept you small. Questions never just unveil freedom, they activate sovereign freedom. Together they flip your internal power source from compliance to sovereignty. Energized listening dissolves the trance. Maverick questions dismantle the programming, and that doubt strikes, your natural prowess returns. The clarity, the courage, the curiosity, the innovation, your voice, the instinct, the fire of desire You stop echoing yesterday and start broadcasting your sovereign signals. That's liberation, and that's unleashing you to be you. And that's something I really have opened up to. The only one that can liberate you is you, but you got to rise out of all the inherited stuff you encompass. And for me, I did all the other stuff that other people's programming. I never went anywhere. It wasn't until I discovered my sovereignty and my willing to question everything that went on in my life. And I am Robert Wilson. And I want to thank you. And may your life be as blessed as you are a blessing to me in the world.